Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's lesson. Today, we'll be discussing connecting to CentOS Linux. First things first, what is SSH? Now, SSH stands for Secure Shell, and it helps system admins to connect to servers remotely. Let's do some housekeeping before we actually go into setting up our SSH server. We will be using two computers for today's exercise. The first one is the CentOS labeled the CentOS 764-bit, and the other one is labeled Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7. They are both CentOS operating systems but labeled differently just so that we have a difference in the two virtual machines. The software I'm using to uh, run the virtual machines is VMware Workstation, like you see up here. And let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing is for us to know what our IP addresses are. Because if the two computers are not on the same network, then it would be impossible for us to connect remotely, especially if we do not have a router in between, if we're going to be on separate networks. Now, to check our IP address, we'll go into the terminal and type the command IP address. We would see that in this case, the IP address has not been set because, as we see here, there is no IP address for the second interface, which will be the interface that we'll be working with in this class. Okay, so in order to fix that, we need to go into the VMware settings and then edit to make sure that we have a DHCP server that would automatically give IP addresses to either of the computers that we use. Let's check the IP address of the other machine as well, and then we'll go to edit that. Okay, so I've done that already, and then we see here as well that in that interface you do not have a an IP address. Okay, so now let's go into edit and then go to virtual network editor, and then let's create a new one. So we'll say change settings. Yes. Okay, so we'll add a network, and the network will be virtual machine network 2. Okay, this will be host only for my virtual machines, and it will have the subnet IP address 192.168.71. So it can assign from 192.168.71.1, 2, 3 up to 254. Okay, so and let's just make sure that that's what the case is. So we'll just make this from 1 to 254, meaning that we can have 254 machines on this network. Okay, and Okay, the list time can be 2 hours, doesn't really matter in this case. Well, we could increase it and say 1 hour, 1 day, 2 hours, and that'll be the maximum list time, and then the as well as the default list time. Okay, so okay. Now that's because this is supposed to be 0, so that they're exactly the same. Okay, so now we apply the changes and okay that. Okay, so that starts the VMnet 2 dynamic host configuration protocol server, which is the DHCP server. And now we can go into our actual VM settings to, let's just get rid of this dialog box. Okay, that's done. Okay, so let's go into the settings of the virtual machine and put them on the VMnet 2. Okay, so we go and look at network adapter. Now network adapter is connected, and we want to put it on a custom virtual network, and we put it on the one we just edited, and that's VMnet 2, and then we click OK. And then for the other computer as well, we'll do exactly the same thing. Okay, so we go to VM settings, network adapter, and this is already on VMnet 2, so we click OK, and all we need to do now is to restart the interface. Okay, so we'll do if, which is for interface down, to shut down the interface, and the name of the interface is ENS33. So ENS33, and then to turn it back up, we do interface, which is IF up, for ENS33. Okay, so this will force it to get an IP address from the DHCP server. At this point, we'll check for the IP address by typing the IP address, and we can see for ENS33, just where is it? We can see the IP address is 192.168.71, which is the network part, and then its own particular number is 2. Okay, and okay, so I've gone ahead to run the same commands that we ran in the GUI based CentOS, that is the CentOS 7, and we see similar commands being executed: the if up, if down, and if up, just to force it to get an IP address from the DHCP server. And then now we're checking for the IP address using IP address show ENS33, since we know that ENS33 is the name of the interface. And now we're grepping for INET, since also we know that the INET line is the one that holds the actual IP address. Okay, and then now it displays the IP version 4 address and the IP version 6 address. Now we see here that the IP version 4 address is 192.168.71.3. Okay, and now that we know that, we can go ahead and check if SSH is installed. So system ctl. Now we want to check the status of our SSH daemon, which is SSHD, and we see that it is active and running. Now, just before we move ahead, we're going to disable our firewall just so that we are able to connect without any issues. So we'll also do system ctl stop firewall daemon. Okay. Now that our firewall is stopped and we are sure that our SSH is running, or the SSH daemon rather is running, we can try to log in from the GUI based operating system. Okay, so we go back into our GUI based operating system, we log in as usual, and we use the SSH keyword to invoke the SSH, and now the IP address of our other computer is 192.168.71.3, and we want to log in as root. Okay, so we do that, and then it says that the authenticity of the one can't be established because we do not have this is the first time that we are logging into the machine, and it says, are you sure you want to continue? Now we type yes, and then now that has been added to our known lists. So now we are requested to type in our password for the root user so that then it grants us access to the root of the other machine. And just let me type that. Okay, so now that that has been typed, you would see that we are actually in the other machine. Now let's check for the contents of the home directory of the root user here so that we can ascertain that we're actually on this computer from the GUI based installation. Okay, so we'll do that and end this lesson. Okay, so to do that, we do an ls using the long listing, and we see that the contents of this are active, Anaconda, desktop, and desktop 1 and file 1 are the contents of the home directory. Okay, so we'll check to see if that's the case here as well, and we will do an ls-l, and we see that it's exactly the same thing with the same permissions as you see here. Okay, so that shows us that we are on the Red Hat Enterprise Linux from this particular machine. Okay, so that's one way to do this. In the next lesson, we'll be looking at how to use SSH to log in remotely using the public key infrastructure. All right, thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.